So my name is Paul Noto. I'm the attorney for the IABC, the Industrial Area Business Coalition, and of course, thank you for being here. And I'm going to, moderate, I guess, or host this forum about flooding. Before we get started, I did want to acknowledge a couple of special people that are here with us who are not elected officials, and that's Jerry Barbario, the village manager, is here. Dan Sarnoff, our assistant village manager, is here. Carolina Fonseca, our building inspector, is here. Gino Cavasilli, our village engineer. And a lot of vowels at the end of these names, which makes me very excited as an Italian. And we also have with us former Mayor Kathy Sable, and there she is. And as you know, when you are a mayor, it's like being in the Army, you never lose the title. And so, of course, I'm very protective of mayors and former mayors. So with us are our elected officials, our 4 village trustees. Mayor Murphy had planned to attend. He had to go to a wake. A dear friend of his apparently passed away. So we do thank him for intending to come. And with us are our 4 trustees. So what I said, I would give them each about 60 seconds to introduce themselves before we get right into the questions. And so I'm going to start to my immediate right with the Deputy Mayor Lou Young. You can use this if you'd like.
I don't think you can hear me, right?
You don't have to use it.
No,
okay.
yeah, it's fine.
Just leave it there.
So I was appointed a little over a year ago to fill an unexpired term when Kelly Wenstrup resigned, and I've had a year of experience prior to being elected. And the only thing I can tell you is that my overall intent in performing this job is to simplify village operations as much as possible from the resident's standpoint, to make it less complex and less mysterious, and to get things off the discussion and planning stage and get them completed and in the community, so we can move on to the next thing. The priority was flooding. That was my main motivation for getting into this. As I said, 20, 30 years ago when I first saw Mamaroneck, it was underwater, and they said, "Oh, we got a plan." And then, then Ida happened. I said, "What happened to the plan?" Well, they're still working on it. So I think there's an urgency to this that we all feel, and that's where I'm.
Time's up. Good.
Okay.
All right. Manny.
Great. So I'm Manny Rawlings. This is my first term as a Village Mamaroneck trustee, and flooding is something that's very dear to me because I've been in the community all my life and have seen multiple floods. So this last flood hit Hurricane Ida in September of 2021 really kind of pushed me to realize I need to take the steps, because I've been here, like Luce mentioned, I'm tired of hearing that there's a plan and there's a plan that doesn't fall through. So I just thought, it's time for new leadership, and I really wanted to get in. I was happy and excited I won with, and everybody on the board that seems to understand that flooding is a very big priority in our community, and I want to do whatever it takes to help mitigate it, whether it's the Army Corps plan or any parallel mitigation structure we can come up with, so our area isn't crying in fear whenever it rains.
Leilani Reed, elected in November. Sorry, I'm talking low. I normally can do project, but you can hear me just fine? Okay, awesome. Newly elected in November, but not new to the community. Lived here for quite a number of years, left, came back, been here on and off, but I do know that flooding is very important to our community, because me and my family have experienced it one too many times. So I know the urgency. One of the things that's most important to me, as along with what Manny and Lou said, was is more so like the healing and the trauma behind it. That to me is just as important as actually fixing our rivers and fixing our waterways. And but I think our community needs healing, so that we can move forward. And that is about it.
Okay, I'm Nora Lucas. I'm Nora Lucas. I'm in my 3rd term as a village trustee, and I'm running again for my 4th term in November. There are several priorities that I have. One is flooding, because I've lived in the area my entire life, and I remember the floods in high school, and I remember the Army Corps plan that didn't come to fruition in the 70s. And when I first ran, I was concerned that the Army Corps plan wasn't going to be an option for us. I thought that the numbers were too high and it wasn't going to get funded, and sadly, it only got funded because of the devastation from Ida, and that I've been a firm believer that we have to do other kinds of mitigation, and we have to deal with other kinds of mitigation and not rely just on the Army Corps plan. So while now that we have the Army Corps plan coming to our community, and we're, the first project is going to be presented, the design specs are going to be presented this summer by the Army Corps. I think that's just one thing that we have to focus on. We've funded some infrastructure studies in this area to try and get water out faster, and I think that needs to be one of the village's many priorities in the coming years.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a number of, so we're going to call questions from the IABC, and after I've explained to the trustees that it's up to them who will answer, or if multiple trustees wish to answer the questions. And then if there are questions from the audience, I'm told that the priority for questions from the audience is to go to IABC members. How I'm going to enforce that, I'm not sure yet. But anyway, let's get started with the first question, which is, the IABC recently met with the Army Corps Project Manager, Bethany McClanahan. We understand that the Army Corps provides the design plan for the flood mitigation, and it's the village's responsibility to hire and oversee contractors to perform the work. We also understand that it's the village's plan to ensure proper continuity and oversight. Besides dredging, what else in the village is the village committed to do to keep the rivers and sewers clean? This is a multi-part question. 2, is the village of Mamaroneck DPW qualified to dig along the bridge walls without compromising the wall construction, or should the work be done by outside contractors? And thirdly, during Hurricane Ida, we have all heard about the containers getting stuck under the bridges. What measures will be taken to avoid another container pod from getting stuck under a bridge, and whose responsibility will that be?
I'll start with answering A. I know one of the things we're committed to is actually keeping our rivers clean. I think before Ida, if you went and looked at our rivers, there was a lot of debris, trash, bikes, anything that was in those rivers, and that's because they haven't been clean in years. So I know that is a very, may seem small, but big part in the devastation in Ida. If we don't take care of our waterways and our rivers and keep them clean from debris, what we're going to expect every time it rains for the water to kind of come up and pile up. So I know besides hoping to be able to dredge, it's also making sure our waterways are up to date and clean and not filled with garbage.
Yeah.
I also know that we do have a lot of projects in the process with our sewers. There were a lot of studies, and I know that we were funded. We received a lot of funding to fix a lot of our sewer systems that have been outdated for many years. So what better time than now to have the money, have the engineers have studied it, and to get them fixed throughout the whole community. Go ahead. Oh.
Yeah, so, this is going to be, I think, looking at these questions, this is sort of like an open book test, and this shouldn't be a one-off conversation. There's a lot of information here that I think we can work with the staff to kind of continue to answer these questions.
Of course.
And maybe this is going to spark some good ideas. It's true. We're trying to keep just junk out of the rivers by removing it. I don't know if we can figure out how to stop people from putting junk in the rivers. That seems to be, I'd never throw anything in the river. I think most people in this room wouldn't do it, but there are people who just see it as an easy way to dispose of something. I can't answer the question about whether the DPW is qualified. I think there's that one to Jerry. And the containers is an issue. I think we haven't taken the village has to take responsibility for those containers. And we don't know to the extent of what the containers did to create backup, but I think that's on the village for allowing them to be in a situation where they could run away in a flood. So I think that should be in our plan. Never allow containers that could get into the river to be in a place proximate where they could escape.
We're talking about definitive answers, which we probably don't have here. And I can speak to intent, my intent, and I hopefully the board's intent. In addition to dredging, which is just one aspect of it, which is to just get some of that silt, that accumulated silt, out of the area, so the water can flow more freely. We've got the dam and the reservoir upstream, and that is my intention is that we have to use that to address the situation on the Mamaroneck River. The dam can be possibly repaired, possibly replaced. The reservoir can be recreated and built. There is county money that is available for some of it. We may have to pony up some money, but it's absolutely essential that we have some control over the flow of that river. Otherwise, we're just waiting for it to rain again. So that's my intent in addressing this. And you can see the issues with the river silt and where it gathers and where it's narrow. Just in the 5 years that I've lived here, it's gotten narrower at the confluence because every time it floods, more silt comes, and we haven't done anything about it. And it's easy to forget about. I'm not, not being too accusative about it, but when it's not raining and it's not flooding, it's easy to not spend money on preventing that sort of thing. And it's hard to take credit for something that doesn't happen. If the flood had happened, if Ida had happened, and we had done everything we should have done, it may have been 4 or 5 feet less, but it still would have been a bad flood. And people would have said, "You see, you did all that, and it happened anyway." So there's an issue that good government and proper preparation isn't always apparent. Problems are apparent, failures are apparent. We have many of those, but we need to do, I think, I like to say, everything yesterday. And so that's my intent on that. As far as the DPW, we have trimmed our costs with this administration, with the way the village is being run now, by using in-house staff a lot more than contracting out. That saves us money. Just with the budget was just printed today. We printed it in-house and saved, I'm told, thousands by not sending it out to a printer. I don't know, all right? It's a thick budget. So that's the kind of thing that we need to do everywhere all the time, so we have the money to spend on the important things like making sure the river keeps flowing when it rains a lot.
Do you want to respond on the DPW question, Jerry? Okay.
Is it possible I can make
No,
a comment
of course.
before Jerry?
You're more important.
No, just before Jerry.
Yeah, before
makes
Jerry.
something.
Go ahead, Leilani. Sorry.
It was in what Nora said in regards to like the containers and things that go into the rivers. There's a lot of things that go into the rivers. People have boats in their backyards. People have furniture in their backyards that kind of clog up a lot of different things. And on top of that, there's stuff that is flowing not just from our village, but from other places that are just flooding. That just is, flows when the rain comes and when there's a lot of flooding. So I just want to keep in mind that it's not. While the containers was a huge, it was a huge blockage at Columbus. There was other things that were in different spaces. That is to why parts of the community was. The water was not flowing, but it had stopped.
And let me jump in on the containers too. The containers were there. The containers everybody's talking about were there because of the food pantry program that was set up in reaction to another crisis, which remember was the COVID crisis, and people needed food, and we were feeding people at that location, and they were using those containers. So it wasn't like we just decided to put containers there. There was a reason for it, and to be, to have some perspective on it, the water had to get very deep to float those. So they did not. They may have delayed some of the draining. They didn't cause the flood because the flood moved them.
The flood had to get high enough to
But here's a philosophical question: in your opinion, whose responsibility is it to police the portion of the river that runs through the village? Because I think that's where the IABC is concerned that, yeah, we get it. People do dumb things, we get that. the issue is who, and this is, again, there's no,
Wrong or right?
right, yeah, this is, I'm not, this is not a test, but philosophically, as you approach your position as a public servant and the role of the village in this, in your opinion, whose responsibility is it to police this portion of the river in the village? That's my.
I'll say right now, it's our responsibility. We haven't done it up to now, and that's what we're trying to do.
Okay.
I mean, you can pass the buck to the state or the county or somebody else, but I think, if we have to take responsibility for it.
And it's ours. It's
I'm going to
the
get Jerry
staff's.
to, he wanted to answer the
It's
technical
staff.
question on
The other night, I had a crew, and the board knows, I had a crew work overnight. Because with the wind and the trees and the fact that we've had rain quite often, we know that there's trees that are gonna go into the river. So we had 2 people from DPW work through the night, monitoring and checking the whole time. Our rivers here were okay, but the Beaver Swamp Brook almost crested. And so we got a little nervous about that. We were able to quickly resolve when we blew a transformer blew, Orienta, Fenimore, in that neighborhood there. And I was out until 1:15 when I had to go back and get a few hours of sleep. So it's our job to police it. We're the ones who are actually cleaning it now. As far as the staff is trained and experienced enough to handle an excavator. We don't have a giant excavator, we have a smaller excavator because we anticipate the amount of work that we have to do after the Army Corps comes in and completes their project is basically maintenance. So we don't need giant equipment. Tomorrow I'm having a conversation with our dredging contractor because he wants an update. Gino has been working with our permit engineer or permit consultant. We're getting there. So I want to make sure that they have the understanding that there's a couple of weeks of mobilization, but we're getting to where we need to be so we can bring in the contractor who we originally contracted with, who dredges the Hudson River and other large areas there. So it's not going to be our responsibility to do any deep dredging. It's going to be the Army Corps, and it's going to be where we need to do the dredging. But as far as maintenance dredging and dredging that we're permitted to do right now, which is river maintenance according to the DEC and the Army Corps, we're capable of doing that.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Okay, we're going to go on to question 2. Besides catastrophic flooding, the industrial area continues to be plagued by nuisance flooding. The town of Mamaroneck was recently awarded a $300,000 grant from Westchester County to study its storm sewer network. It appears that neither the industrial area nor the TOD are within that study. So is the village of Mamaroneck applying for a similar grant? Or do you have other plans to study the storm sewer network in the industrial area and in the TOD area?
I'm happy to start with that. I would say that the reason that the grant the town got doesn't include the industrial area is because they can't get grants for the village. They have to get grants for the portion of the town that they govern. And this is a question for Dan, because Dan is our grant person. I don't know whether we've applied for those, for the same kinds of grants they've applied for. We did fund a study, an engineering study, which I think Gino has started to organize. I think it'll be an outside consultant, but you're setting up the parameters to figure out some of this infrastructure in this area so that we can see if we can improve that, because I think there's backups at the railroad, basically. That pipe seems to back up.
Okay. So, but the county got the money, I believe, through through the county's flood mitigation fund. But I think last year, when we discussed how to spend the ARPA money, that's what the board wanted to spend money on, was a flood mitigation study for the industrial area. And it was clearly defined, and that's what Gino's working on. As far as those sources of funding, we have applied for county flood mitigation grant funding for Hillside Avenue Bridge. We have not applied for anything specific to the industrial area yet, but I think we can take a look how the bids come in for when we do get the responses for a industrial area flood study.
Also, as part of the Resilient New York study that's being done by the DEC, they had sent over our consultant models of the Mamaroneck rivers and also the Beaver Swamp Brook. So we're waiting for additional parameters for that, so it would help them finalize, or it will only enhance their flood study of this area.
You guys want to add anything to that?
No, I think
Okay,
that covers it.
that's fine, okay. The industrial area is 98% impervious due to roads, buildings, and parking lots. It seems like a good thing to encourage redevelopment in this area so the commercial property owners will have to upgrade with building code approved stormwater management systems, which we know the planning board requires. Will a study be done on the efficacy of requiring more expensive pervious servicing for parking lots and driveways before mandating its use? Would the village help defray the cost of more expensive pervious servicing for parking lots and driveways when new projects begin in the industrial area?
I think, well, I think we've studied plenty, and I think that if you're in a flood zone and you're making improvements, they need to be pervious surfaces, period. Now, people may disagree with me. I think it's going to be more expensive to build in a flood zone. You just have to accept that. But if we can mitigate the threat of flooding, the property will be more valuable, and that'll be worth it. I think we've got to require that. I think denying growth reflexively is a bad idea because, as you mentioned, these impervious surfaces remain. They're empty. Some of these buildings are empty. They contribute to flooding. They're not contributing to the economy. There are plans that some of these owners have to improve them. And I think we should do what we can to move these things along, get some of these structures up and built, and by up I mean elevated, and have the pervious surfaces and the other mitigation tools like dry wells and the rest of that, and on-site retention to turn a negative into a plus. So I don't think blocking development is the way to go. I think encouraging smart development is the way to go. And it's going to cost a little more, yeah, but that's better than being told no.
Yeah.
I don't think right now, if with the question is saying would the village help defray the cost of more expensive pervious servicing, I can't answer that right now because we don't know. We're really going through a serious budget time, and there are a lot of expensive things on the list of things that the village needs to handle. So I can't really answer, personally me, I'm not speaking for everybody, to answer if the village can help with the cost, but I think what we can do is really work with our planning department, really work with our zoning, and to ensure that if there was things that this industrial area wanted to do to improve their buildings or their sites, that we will work to make sure that that's something that you can do, along with our wonderful planning department.
I mean, I don't know if we are actually allowed to contribute to funds to pave or to help individual property owners, so I think that's a question. But in terms of the study about the efficacy of requiring more expensive pervious surfacing, I think there is a question as to what kinds of pervious surfaces are appropriate in what kinds of situations. So it's not just, obviously a pervious surface is going to help mitigate flooding more than an impervious surface. But the specifics are sort of the devil's in the details. And so I do think that the engineering study, for instance, there's parts of this area that have an aquifer. So depending on where the aquifer is, depends on what might flood more. So I think that the studies that we're doing may actually yield information about what kinds of surfaces would be more beneficial for this area, because it might be different for this area than it would be for Shore Acres. So I think I don't know that, I think that the studies we're doing, I would hope, would help contribute to that information. Am I off base totally?
No.
There is no off base. You get the answer, and you can answer any way you want. Thank you. The Waverly Avenue Bridge is about to be rebuilt very soon, and this has the potential for a major disruption in the business community in the industrial area during the work week. Questions are, when will it begin? How long will it take? Who will provide oversight and updates to the businesses in the industrial area? And who will control the traffic?
I think it's what, July, 2 years?
So the town went out to bid on Monday of this week. Their bids are due back on April 4th. There is a maintenance protection and traffic plan that's been included in the contract. That was developed during the design phase. The police department, fire department, village staff, town staff were all involved with it. And I know that they actually did meet with a couple of property owners in the industrial area to go over the plan to make sure that the needs were met. We're actually meeting with the town and the engineers on the project this Friday to review it one last time before bids are due back. So we were in a position to discuss with contractors during the pre-bid meeting. As far as the...
So can you tell us what the plan is? The traffic?
I can share the plan. It's like 7 or 8 different
Oh,
pages.
okay. Well, I mean, obviously, you know,
Yeah,
it's gonna be
it's-
backed up. It's a popular drive-through. It's gonna,
Yeah.
and these, you know, they can't just all go to Hoyt, right? So I know Jimmy Lance is up here and he had some ideas, but, you know, the question is, are they thinking of reversing the other street to
No,
make it?
we're not looking to increase traffic going through Washington, no. As far, my recollection is that there is gonna be a temporary light at Hoyt to control traffic. I hope it move along. You know, again, we're gonna review this with the engineering firm and the town this week, just have a final look at it.
I mean, if the plan is use Hoyt,
Yeah.
you're gonna have a disaster on it. Hoyt's already
I
very
got a
busy.
question.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Why would they consider just putting a temporary bridge over Center Street? Just because it, you know, there's no reason, we own both pieces of property, and then that would get the traffic flow right back out of there.
I think they looked at all this during the design phase, and it was probably deemed not reasonable. And at this point, you know, they're looking to get their bids back on April 4th. They'd have to scrap the entire bid process and do the contract, because that's a major impact on their.
So Dan, if they scrap the bid process, it just pushes the project on. I mean, the bridge does not need to be changed today, right? Or does
Well,
it not?
in terms of, so the town of Mamaroneck has an agreement with the state of New York as to when the project needs to be complete. You know, we had the same agreement. My recollection is that we basically had to be done within 4 or 5 years of the original award. The town received their grant in 2019, so, you know, we're pretty much at that point already.
Is this a 6-month project or a year project?
2 years.
No,
Two years to replace
So,
that one?
No,
bridge?
so you would, I'll pay for a temporary bridge if it's gonna be 2 years, because
Okay.
Well, wait, let's let Dan answer the question. Okay.
I'm just saying.
Before we jump on him, let's let Dan
A 6 to
answer.
9 month
Yeah.
process. It means it will start in 2023 and probably end sometime in 2024. I mean, for instance, with Hillside Avenue Bridge, we started in the end of September of 2021 and opened the bridge at the end of August in 2022. So that was 11 months. And I think that was, in many ways, a bigger project than the Waverly Avenue Bridge
Okay.
project. So it will go through 2 calendar years, but it's not 24 months of construction.
Yeah, I said 2 years.
Yeah.
I'm a believer in under-promising and over-delivering.
Is that part of the
That's
bid
good,
process?
that's a good
Process
policy,
is-
yeah.
Is the length of how long it's supposed to take? Because, I mean, Gino knows how long it should take, pretty
No,
much.
No,
right?
I mean, what Dan
So-
had mentioned was
Yeah.
correct. From the start to the end of construction, it was 9 months, right? It was
It was, well, for Hillside, it was 11 months.
11 months, so,
Right.
yeah.
And that's with having to contend with, starting in the aftermath of Ida and having several significant rainstorms that probably caused 1 to 2 months of delay, having to work through the winter. You know, had we had better physical circumstances to begin with, it might have been a shorter project, but, I don't believe I believe it'll be a 6 to 9 month construction time.
I would suggest that the Board of Trustees sitting here today asterisk this, because this is something proactively we can work together on with the local authorities, police, etc. Because, as we all know, Hoyt on a good day gets backed up, Waverly gets backed up, so just having a street light will not effectuate anything, we're going to need police presence, not just on Waverly or Fenimore and Hoyt, but also on Mamaroneck Avenue. So it's going to take a collective effort. So I think that probably when we go, and this is eminent, so this is not something that we're looking a year from now, that probably members of the industrial area should sit with the chief of police and the village officials.
Fire
and the
department,
fire
because
department, and
that's
everyone.
gonna be a problem if they can't get down here because it's just
So
totally clogged.
I think we need to work
They
together
can't go
on
over the
that one.
Waverly Avenue Bridge right now.
Yeah.
No.
So that bridge
No,
not
that's
being
not the
out.
problem, I meant by
No,
the
but-
volume.
But on
No,
Hoyt,
but I was specifically about the fire department.
Yeah,
Whether or not the Waverly Avenue Bridge is in service or out of service is not an issue because they can't use it right now. And this is a.
no, I understand that, I wasn't talking about that, once you shift the volume over though, if it's in the middle of the day and there's a fire down here and the fire department has to get here, it could cause problems, I'm just being health and safety.
Well, no, I think we
that's all.
understand this is a town of
Health and
Mamaroneck
safety,
project,
that's
not a
all.
village
Right.
project.
This
So
is a
before we
town
jump on
Mamaroneck.
these guys and blame them for everything, it's not their project. But, that being said, there should be signage as far back as Palmer saying, remember, people are coming from two directions to go through Waverly Avenue. They come from Scarsdale every morning, there's a huge, flow of people going right through. They go from Scarsdale to White Plains. And then you're gonna have other people coming from Palmer Avenue side. So what I'm saying is there should be signage on both ends saying Waverly Avenue Bridge closed, no entry, and no access. So at least they know, stay on Palmer to go around if you're gonna go on Mamaroneck Avenue, or the people coming from Scarsdale, I don't know what they're gonna do. They're gonna
I guess what.
they're gonna have to go back to White Plains the other way. But the
Paul,
point is they need, I'm just saying, please tell the town this, to put up signage
Yeah, I mean,
and to have, and they should be, quite frankly, be paying to offset your costs to have our police or whatever we're doing, because it's not fair to the village taxpayer.
So if I could, for the
Yeah.
coalition, suggest that the next meeting be with the town engineer
Yeah, that's a good idea.
and their design consultant, so that they can put on the screen, instead of seeing Jimmy the whole time,
Right.
actually see the plan. This way
Yeah, no,
you
you're
can
right.
understand it, suggest it, provide some real life kind of scenarios, and then if there's adjustments, we'll be here. I mean, I don't have a problem coming here. Our police chief, our fire chief, we won't have a problem coming here. But it's their project, and it's impacting us, but this industrial area is in
You're
the
right.
town of Mamaroneck. So,
And the village, what I'm saying is,
Right.
it's
Well,
their
village is in the
project,
town of
but you're gonna get the
Yeah.
complaints. Like, they're not gonna call the town, because no one around here knows who the town is.
Right, exactly.
I mean, the town is what? I mean,
No,
they don't do anything for
I'll
us. They're
call
gonna
the
call
town.
you and say, hey, I can't,
I'll
it's
be
all
calling
picked
the
up.
town, that's for sure.
Right, so,
Yeah.
trust me, I know the drill. No one calls the town, because the town doesn't do anything, the
I
town.
get it.
Can I ask just a follow-up
Yeah.
on your question? So, this is for Jerry, so we will have, our police department will be monitoring the traffic control, but we won't be paying for it, it'll be paid for out of the
project.
project,
Yeah.
so, okay, so,
Just like we have an outside rate.
yep,
An
I know
outside
about
rate.
that, I know about that.
So that outside rate will be charged to the project.
The project,
Ah, good.
and we're sure that that's adequate. Not the rate, we know the rate's adequate, that the number of police
Officers.
required to do the traffic control.
I don't think that'll be a problem. I don't think that'll be a problem.
It's always the type of thing that if we need to supplement it, we supplement it.
And I
It
think
is what it is.
what Paul is saying is that there's undoubtedly going to be a ripple effect with this. So the problem needs to be dealt with before you get here, back in both directions.
Yeah, and
Because
that's why
we're
we,
traffic out.
that's why we have the maintenance protection of traffic plan, why we've reviewed it and why we're reviewing it again.
But we also need non-engineers to participate. No offense, Gino. We
Plenty of-
just need non-engineers.
Plenty of those around here.
Yes, there's plenty of those around, right, so.
You wanna ask a
so that's
question,
what we
Mary?
need.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, if there is like a good alternative plan to have like a supplementary bridge over Center Avenue that you just brought up, why can't that be looked at as a supplementary project? If it, like you said, you'd fund it, or maybe a group of people would fund it. If there's another safety valve, something like that, why can't that be looked at as a supplementary project instead of destroying a bid process?
That's a question
So
for the
that at
town,
least
Mary.
it's looked.
That's a question for
Looked
the
at.
town.
All right, well,
And I think it may have been looked at and.
Well, I think Jerry had a good idea. We should meet with the town and we'll pepper them with questions. Okay,
Yeah.
fair
Tell
enough.
them that this is a good group. Easy.
Right.
One more thing, if there is some sort of a committee where there's the police department, the fire department are looking at the traffic flow, we'd like to be a part of it if we could.
Yeah.
In some way, have a representative from the IADC on that as well, just because we talk to all these guys over here.
So, Michael, it's project specific. I don't bring in the police or the fire unless I think we need the police and the fire involved. It's not like a committee itself. But here, they were involved with Dan, who led for the village, and Rob Wasp, who led for the town. So they would be here as well when you guys have this meeting. All right, we'll bring them in.
Okay, let's move on to the next question. Street parking continues to be an ongoing issue in this area. The Village of Mamaroneck conducted extensive studies in the 90s and 2000s. However, nothing gets done. Does the Village of Mamaroneck have any plans to improve parking in the industrial area? If not, will the village begin to take real steps towards improving the parking situation and not have another study?
I am told that there is property available in the industrial area, perhaps owned by some of the people in this room, that we could, perhaps work something out with to create parking, and that could be a solution. It's something we've talked about on the side at Village Hall. Yeah, I mean,
No, I hear you.
You need parking.
If anyone else wanted to chime in.
Parking is a problem everywhere, so I think at this point, if we can build structures or have structures that can house parking, it'd be best, because our streets are already narrow, and people are already complaining about our sidewalks and wanting bike lanes and everything else. So if there is room for a structure that can house parking, then that would be best.
I mean, do you think a structure would be a viable alternative, or do you think a structure is viable in the industrial area?
Well, if it's in accordance to, in terms of how it's built, if it's pervious and it's not flood prone, then yeah.
Jared?
Do you think?
So,
Oh, sure.
building a structure is the solution to all the passenger cars, right? But is there anyone in here from Blondie's? So, look at a company like Blondie's, right? They grow and they grow and they grow. I wasn't gonna use the Murphys. They grow and they grow and they grow. If we take the cars off the streets, we're gonna have more Blondie trucks on the streets. It may never be a solution, but we can build a parking garage. And when I say build a parking garage, there's two models to build a parking garage. We do it, we fund it, and we charge for the parking. Or we bring in a company, they build a parking garage, and they get the revenue from the parking garage. But the passenger cars can come off the streets, right? The little SUVs, the big SUVs. As far as the trucks, we're never gonna build a parking garage for trucks. So that's gonna be the reality of it. I think we get the cars off the street, that'll help for a little while, but they'll just be filled in with trucks. So I'm not sure. You have a finite amount of space here, and you have companies that continue to grow. God bless them. I want them to grow. But I think that's the reality of this situation.
Oh, go ahead, Dan.
And you talk about, the environmental aspects. In many ways, a parking garage can be more environmentally sensitive than a huge surface lot.
Yeah.
If you think of a surface lot that has space for 300 cars,
Right.
the amount of actual space on that same site that you need in a parking structure is less, so you could have more of the site open or have some other environmental feature out there.
Is addressing the parking situation a priority for you?
For the village as a whole, yes.
Yeah.
Well, no, really, we
Oh,
only
for
care about
this
the
area?
industrial area.
I mean,
You see, that's the problem. We're left out.
Truth be
No,
told,
I
yeah, truth be
really
told,
get
this
it.
group is really focused on the
no, and I
industrial
get
area.
it, and I get it, but to me, it's one and the same. It's a part of the village, so yes, it's important to us. So I don't think of it separate, I think of it as the whole. When we start thinking of separate, that's how we compartmentalize. We have to think of it as a whole. So yes, if you want me to say yes for the industrial area, yes, but to me, it's the whole.
And to be honest, to be truthful about it, safety comes first. So in virtually, well, a good percentage of the recommendations we get on changing usually involves the elimination of parking spaces because of sight lines and various other things. We've cut back suggestions that we've gotten from the Traffic Commission to remove fewer spaces because we're sensitive to this question. We know that parking is a premium.
Yeah.
Could valet parking be considered an option to look at? I know in other areas, in White Plains and places like that where they have parking issues, they were able to do that and then put the cars in areas that weren't being utilized further away. But it's something maybe
look into it.
I think it's something we could explore, but I don't think that's, I think, I like what we said earlier with Leonie mentioned of having a structure, because like, and also as Dan added, that it takes away from having a huge lot that can hold 300 cars to a smaller structure where you can kind of open the space up and make it either look a little bit better or make it environmentally better for our community. So I just think that is probably the better option, but I think we can explore something similar to you said within White Plains and see how that's operated, and if that will ultimately be a better solution.
Well, are you exploring it, is I guess the.
No, I
are
don't
not.
think we have.
I mean, Trustee Young mentioned that property's available, so I mean, I'm assuming someone in your world has looked at this or is continuing to look at it. So I think from this group's perspective, they just want to know, again, from a governing philosophy, is addressing the parking problem in industrial a priority? And then B, if the answer is yes, then, you know, what steps are you taking to get there? Right?
So many different ways.
Yeah, if it's gonna cost money, probably not. If it can generate revenue, probably yes. That's.
Well, everything's gonna cost money, I don't,
Yeah.
but the question is, you can, you know, there's ways to offset that to charge user fees, like some, oh, I'm sorry, yeah.
Yeah, just one other thing, I worked with the village on this years ago with one of the mayors.
Yes, sir.
They were looking at putting in a robotic type of garage back behind the,
On the Spencer lot?
back behind the, where the movie theater was, that
Oh,
area there.
Phillips Park Road, yeah.
Yeah, I worked with them, I brought in a bunch of consultants that I know of that we worked with that build and own those garages. So that's another option. Instead of a regular type, you're able to get a lot more cars in a smaller space. So,
Okay.
if you want my help with that, I'm more than happy to. give
Yes,
you some
Nora.
I
names.
think we were, you know, before the pandemic, you know, BP, the industrial area advisory committee was working on zoning, and Andrew was part of that, and many people in this room were part of that, and it fell by the wayside during the pandemic, and I think it's time to resurrect that, because
Well, that's a
there
good
were a lot.
segue into my next question.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, before you get that question.
Yeah, yeah, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
Let
No, I mean,
Trustee
it's just
Lucas
that
finish, go ahead, yeah.
There were a lot of, you know, there was a lot of consideration about how to incorporate parking into properties that were being redeveloped, and there was this like great workshop where we worked with Legos, and we actually did some, you know, tried to do some build outs. And I think it's time to think about that again, because when properties are redeveloped, they can be more flood-proof, they can create more revenue for the owners, for the village, and they can create more parking opportunities. And so I think I understand it got dropped, I think it's time to resurrect it.
A question on my thing on parking is, are we not enforcing the regulations that are already in place on parking in the area? I know some people that are not in the meeting, which they could have been here, complain all the time about cars that are just on the streets day after day, they're just sitting there, never move. And other people have their cars are there parked 8 hours a day. I don't know, is there any regulation for street parking at all? Should there be meters?
Enforcement, yeah, well, enforcement comes up every time there's a parking issue. Enforcement is a component of that. And, you know, we've got 50 police, they can only do so much enforcement. One of the ideas going forward that I have would be to create maybe overnight a strike force that goes into an area and you know, and does a ticket blitz in an area to let people know that this is not acceptable anymore, even though they've gotten away with it, you know, for a while. I mean, there are ways to address that, but you can't just depend on enforcement because we don't have the ability to do it.
There are a lot of strategies and technologies out there when it comes to parking enforcement. You know, as a general rule, and I've been with parking for a long time, you know, the United States tends to be about 2 decades behind the rest of the world when it comes to the application of some of this stuff. So, I mean, there are things out there that something the board wants us to, you know, take a look at and make suggestions. We certainly can.
I don't know if you.
Sorry, you have a question? Yeah.
I don't know if everybody's looked at the comp plan. The comp plan deals with a variety of issues. One of them is transportation, parking, vehicles. There are a number of recommendations, including making the village more walkable, reduce the use of cars. including the increasing.
This is the village, the village comprehensive plan?
Yes.
Okay,
It just came out, the new.
The
Okay.
new adopt date came out.
So,
I'm assuming they're familiar with it.
And there are a number of recommendations that may mitigate our parking and vehicle issues that should be looked at.
Okay.
And
Well, all due respect, the meeting here is industrial area and business, so
Sorry, no,
we're
it's all right.
looking at
I didn't know who he was.
those issues there, so.
Okay.
you
So
better
let me,
deal with us.
but I want to, this, Nora gave us a great segue into our next question, which is, attracting new business into the area should include the industrial area as well as the businesses not in the central business district of Mamaroneck Avenue between Halsted and the harbor. Question one, this is a multi-part question. Why has there not been a full-time planner hired to help develop the vision for the future of the village? And then as we go on to the next question, the village spent approximately $250,000 on the industrial area committee overlay zone study, known as MAKR zone. Some great ideas were generated. It, of course, as Nora pointed out, lay dormant since the pandemic. And then it appeared that the village had no appetite to change the zoning in the industrial area. Do you have any opposition to resurrecting the industrial area committee and moving ahead with its overlay zone study findings? So that's like 4 little questions.
Any opposition? No, not from
Yeah,
me.
no.
I don't have opposition.
No.
Okay, that's 3 votes.
I don't, yeah.
We're done. So,
Well, no, okay, you can explain
and
working backwards from this.
You
Okay,
talked about the
so,
planner, though. I mean, keep in mind, we have a building inspector, engineer, we have new people. We've done a lot of hiring. We just haven't gotten to the planner yet. Jerry,
I can,
yeah.
so our planner was, the planner that I made an offer to was provided the offer letter on Monday, and so we're going to allow that individual to give his current municipality notice, and we will have a planner here, full-time planner here in less than 30 days.
oh, well, that answers that question. Okay, there you go. You could have said that, Trustee Young. Why did you let him take all the credit?
Because I didn't know that.
Well,
You know, you're the elected official. He's supposed to make you look good, not the other way around. Okay, I got to teach you guys how this works. Okay, okay. So on to the next and
I'm
the.
sorry, Nora has
I want to take
No,
a stab.
yeah, go ahead.
I will say that Jerry, I think we had a problem with planners. We had a great planner, 2 good planners who left. There were other planners who just weren't either suited or found different opportunities, so that is that a fair way of saying it?
Oh, yeah, very fair.
And we didn't have Carolina. We had a building department that was not running so smoothly. And so we have been using a consulting planner who I think really made a difference. I think that ex-planning board chair would say that.
Yeah.
So we really had to get some processes in order before we could make some progress. And we had to find the right planner. I'm hoping Jerry's found the right planner. I think we're kind of on a cusp of being better able to handle projects and handle everything going forward. And I think we really do need to revisit the maker zone. And I also think that this group of people who are, a motivated group of business people and property owners should really consider a business improvement district, which, it's done sort of in conjunction with government, but it helps communities all over New York State have had great success with business improvement districts because the businesses are invested in improving their specific community, and this district is very different from our commercial district on the avenue. So I think maybe there should be 2 business improvement districts, but I think that would be a good way of property owners having a little more say over what happens and just relying on a group of elected officials.
Yeah.
And to follow up on Paul's advice, the board has something scheduled for the 27th to talk specifically about, economic development for the industrial area. And we're working on a resolution, hoping to have ready for discussion at that work session.
So the idea, and again, it's still in the embryonic stage, but it would be to have the village split up into zones, one of which would be the industrial area. So it's definitely going to be addressed specifically in that matter.
Is this something you should have the industrial area committee be part of? Because
Yeah.
it sounds like something that's
There
right
would-
up
there
their
would
alley.
certainly- There would certainly be, yes.
Yeah.
Invited to.
Mike and I talked about it,
Huh?
and he gave me a list of names.
You will give him a list of names?
You weren't on it.
I don't need to be on it, I don't need to be on it, okay. Not too expensive to be on that list. Okay,
why you're not
so, all right, exactly. All right, next question. Developing a sports complex in the industrial area is a concept that is picking up steam and has backers in the community. What are your thoughts about this type of, quote, land use?
I think it's, right now, it's dependent on changing the zoning, right? I
Yes.
think that's what we have to do. We have to like, it was part of the maker plan of zoning, but it can't happen now. So no matter what a wonderful idea it is, the zoning has to change first.
So then at the end of the day, it's up to us.
Well, that's a policy question for you guys, so,
Yeah.
I mean, that's,
The-
you know, again, it all starts with the philosophy, and
Yeah.
so,
I think,
you know,
I mean, I think it's, like Nora said, like, there's things that need to be done if we wanted to pursue an opportunity like that, but I just think we need to hear from the community if that is something that may, or especially this area, if that is gonna impede or hurt the businesses in this area. We wouldn't wanna do anything that's gonna drastically affect the businesses and the residents in the community. And I just feel like something like adding a sports complex, as we were talking before, we were talking about traffic, I can just see, some issues happening there, but I definitely think it's something we should pursue.
Well, it's not likely it's gonna happen before the Waverly
Yeah,
Avenue Bridge is
exactly.
completed,
Yeah.
so.
No, but most sports complexes, if you see them in communities, are in some type of industrial area where there is an open space and the parking is included, because sometimes the parking is below or around it. So it doesn't necessarily contribute to traffic, but it does.
It will, yeah, I agree. I mean, it may not, it would depend, but I just think in any complex would have to include some type of raised parking or parking along with it. I don't think we can come to this area where it already has a parking issue and propose something like that and not have that be included by whoever were to develop the proposed complex.
I mean, one of the advantages of this area, not about sports complex, is that it's proximity to the thruway.
Yeah.
So people can get right on without
Yes.
driving through town,
Exactly.
which is always the concern when you do anything, it's always people drive through
IKEA,
town.
IKEA.
Yeah, exactly. So you have good,
And-
that's one advantage to this area is that you have that.
And we still have the question of sports time at Harbor Island. What to do with that?
Right, okay. No follow-up questions on this? Okay.
Paul,
Yeah.
if I can,
Yeah,
the
sure.
one thing, whether it's an indoor sports facility or anything that's not industrial related, the beautiful thing about those ancillary and additional uses is that it doesn't compete with the parking during peak hours during the day. You come down here at 7 a.m., there's tremendous amount of traffic. 5 p.m., tremendous traffic. When you walk out here this evening after this meeting, you can roll a bowling ball down the street. There's ample parking. So these type of uses will be complementing the current existing uses, and that was the whole philosophy behind the Industrial Advisory Committees, finding that niche of complementing the existing uses, protecting and encouraging the existing uses, of bringing in additional options and additional uses that will supplement and complement, not compete with the existing uses. So an industrial, a sports complex for soccer, volleyball, basketball would actually be more used in the evening and weekends when the industrial area is at its more calmer moment. So that in itself, and in addition to that, if I am busy 9 to 5 during a weekday, and in the evening I make a deal with TJ Milo, say, TJ, you can use my parking in the evening. I don't need a huge structure because he's going to use my parking in the evenings or on weekends when it's not my peak use. We're going to work together collectively. So he's successful, I'm successful, and she's successful, and I'm not hurting anybody.
Right.
So I think that is the holistic and when it comes to these type of dialogues.
Okay, so we're getting down to the last two questions. The business community continues to have problems with the village's planning and zoning boards. The length of time and amount of money spent on trying to get project approval is going to discourage new businesses from coming to Mamaroneck and discourage existing business and property owners from making improvements. How do you propose to correct the planning and zoning issues in the village and to make the process more business-friendly?
I think it's similar to what Nora, I think what we kind of all said with the new hiring of the wonderful people that are in the village right now, we are moving processes along. And even though something we can get enough, I mean, Carolina, if you want to speak to it, but I think you've been doing an amazing job in the planning department. With the zoning board and everything, things may need to move along, but I think everybody's been working together to ensure.
I think the issue is more not the building department, it's more the planning and zoning boards. The
And
process
that's-
of going through those boards is,
It is,
it's cumbersome and time consuming for a lot of small businesses who, I mean, I can just give you an example. There's a little tea shop trying to come into Mamaroneck Avenue in an existing space. The escrow is $2,500. I mean, that, for a little guy, that's a lot of money. You know, so there has to be some relationship between what you're charging and what they're doing. And like, it's not gonna cost the village, outside consultant, $2,500 to look at 1,200 square feet in a 4-seat tea shop. You know, I mean, these are, I'm saying the margins for these people are very small. And so you add a lot of costs to start up, and they're going to go somewhere else. That's what happens. And I think, so I don't think it's the building department, because they don't set the fees. They just, you know, they're just told what the fees are. That's what they do.
I think there's a combination of things, and I think examples like that, and not, I mean, I think examples are helpful. I know 5 years ago, we did this matrix report. We sort of did a deep dive, and it got dropped. But and I know Carolina has been working on and evaluating the fees to make sure they're consistent with other communities. You know, there was a big complaint about a restaurant that couldn't get a special permit, you know, this summer or spring. Well, they hadn't applied for it. Of course they didn't get it. They hadn't applied for it. You know, that was, so I think that knowing specifically where things are gummed up would be helpful for Carolina, because she is the gatekeeper of what goes to the boards and commissions, or her department is the gatekeeper. And then also just making sure that I work, you know, I'm an architectural historian, and I work on environmental review all over the place. And typically, communities, most projects take a long time. A little tea shop is different. There's probably no big environmental review, but typically what happens is the community asks for something, and the applicant just doesn't want to provide it, and that is often what takes a long time. So I think that, and I wouldn't say that's true of the Murphy brothers. I think they provided everything they get asked for. And you know, we as a board of trustees can't get involved in specific land use applications, but we can help make the regulations uniform and smoother and more consistent. And we had a law before the pandemic to make all of the notice provisions equitable, so that you have the same area of notice for every application. And that got dropped. Our village attorney has been encouraging us to resurrect that, and I think we will. And also to figure out ways in which there's only, you know, there's sort of one kind of notice, so that you don't have to notice before every board, that you can have the noticing done in one fell swoop. So I think that we're taking some steps to mitigate that, and I think if there's specific instances, having Carolina know about those would be helpful.
One thing that I experienced and was one of my plans to speed up, especially larger projects, when people wanted to come in, they have to go, a lot of times meet with different departments, and sometimes the departments were contradicting other departments, and the process could slow down. So what the mayor did in White Plains a long time ago, my experience was he revamped the whole process, so when you went in to do something, all the different departments were brought in at the same time around the table, and the developer was able to present the plan, and we went around the table with each department chiming in with their requirements and the process. Eventually it did break down appropriately, because not everything's going to be done collectively all in one group. But that sped up the process immensely, and it cleared up a lot of...
Yes, you know, Larchmont does that. If you want to do a project in Larchmont, you have to have a meeting with the chair of the zoning board, the planning board, you know, the coastal zone commission, all at one time, and they will schedule that meeting with you, and then they will all chime in and go back to the board and say, and they'll give you the roadmap. This is where you go and what you do. We don't do that in the village, obviously. And the other issue is that you do appoint the people on the boards. I'm not saying, you know, I understand you can't get involved in applications. And the conflict between the boards is always a problem.
But it's not just building and planning, and the fire,
Right.
that's a big one, and traffic, you know, the different components which sometimes get in the way. And
pass along?
It's something that I had talked about kind of prior to being on the board. It's something I've been thinking about. I haven't really proposed it in a work session yet, but what time then better than it's now. But is having all the board chairs be in one meeting because of things like this, whether it is flooding, whether it's people who want to build into the community, whatever it is, and if there's different different items that will have each and every, maybe not all boards, but the main boards like planning or zoning or harbor coastal zone, if they need to be in one room to make a decision, let it be. So that's something, if it wasn't monthly, it would be quarterly or possibly on a as-need basis.
Okay, last question. The reason we're all here is because of Hurricane Ida. The relationship between the commercial property businesses in the village has deteriorated over the years. Why do you think that is? What do you propose to change it? And would the trustees commit to appointing an active liaison to the business community? And that includes Industrial Area Committee and the Chamber of Commerce, not the IABC.
Can I add something to that question?
Of course.
That I would like them to think about. I'm Regina Bellata, particularly interested in the flooding issues. It's wonderful what everybody has said about cleaning out the rivers, dredging, whatever the maintenance issues of the rivers are, but ultimately, and it's wonderful that the Army Corps of Engineer, their plan is finally being funded and it's going to happen, I think, in 3 years. I'm not sure when it's going to start. My main concern, and that of my family, we own property on Mamaroneck Avenue right along the river, across the street from the park, is what is going to be done with the 3 feet of water that's left behind. And as you speak to the last question, I'd like to keep in mind that everything that's being talked about is mitigating only a couple of feet of water. We have 5 or 6 feet of water in our building. I understand that the plan is to bring it down to 2 or 3 feet. What's going to happen with that 2 or 3 feet, and what happens to our property values?
Well, I can say that
beyond that?
the mitigation you're talking about is that's the Army Corps plan by itself.
Right.
And people had said, well, it's not going to solve the problem. Well, it's not going to solve the problem because it's a flood mitigation problem. It's not a flood control problem. But the additional things that we want to do is to further mitigate, to bring that 3 feet down. Everything else that we're planning, everything else the village is doing is in addition to what the Army Corps is doing. So,
and that's going to take care of the other 2 or 3 feet?
I can't promise it, but
That's the goal.
that's our goal. That's our goal. That's our intent, and that's what we want to happen. And believe me, the upstream
Dealing with the dam.
things these are not small projects we're talking about. This is a big undertaking. And I think we can turn these floods into a nuisance instead of an existential threat. That's my intent. That's my hope on this board. Can I promise it won't flood?
The person who's going to run that? Who's going to be our in-between? Speaking to the
Well, yeah, the question is, would you consider appointing a liaison to the business community? And that's the Chamber of Commerce, the other, not just this group.
So somebody from this committee.
The Board of Trustees. No, what they're suggesting is that the Board of Trustees have a liaison to the business community. Meaning that includes the Chamber of Commerce, you know, you have multiple business sections here, obviously, so.
I mean,
and
the first
they
thing
would love to be meeting with one of you regularly.
Well, the first thing the first action I ever took after being appointed was the next morning I went to a Chamber of Commerce meeting, and they were like shocked that I was there. So, and then the next time I brought Jerry with me, and I think Jerry's been there every time since, right?
Yeah. No, I can jump in here because as the Vice President of the Chamber of Commerce, everybody was delighted that you did come, but we haven't seen anybody there since July.
Okay.
And it's one of these things is, we're trying to change the conversation here, no disrespect, not pointing any fingers, but, you know, the feeling is, I guess the mayor the other day, in something that he wrote, I saw online, he used the words unseen and unheard. The business council, the business group here, the commercial property owners, they feel that same way. We feel unseen and unheard, that nobody cares about our stuff. Now, at the chamber meetings, we'll have George Latimer will show up almost every meeting. You know, Jane from the town supervisor show up. They looking around, they see nobody from the village, they say, maybe the village doesn't care. So it's just.
Until they start with the Waverly Avenue Bridge, then she won't
They
be
don't
showing up.
care,
So
right,
no, I'm
yeah,
kidding.
that's the other thing.
Just kidding.
So, but it's like this group, our group, the IABC, we don't want a liaison with the village. We've got another agenda, as you can tell. But the Chamber of Commerce and also I think the Industrial Area Committee, they really do need a strong relationship with the trustees and the board.
So something we can just discuss it.
I think that it might be more than, like, but maybe it's a better way of like dividing it up and having different trustees liaison with different groups and report back. That might be more practical, but I don't know. But I think that we definitely need to go back to the Industrial Area Committee. I mean, that there was a trustee liaison to that. That's one concrete thing. I think if we can work with the Chamber of Commerce and work on some business improvement districts, there would be somebody who's a liaison. So I think that really makes sense, and it's not how the board is structured, but that doesn't mean we can't restructure the way we think. So I just feel like this is like an open book. Like there's like, this gives us, you know, come with more questions. There's a lot of information here that we can answer. Some things could be answered today. Other things may need to be more developed, and I think it's like a really good start, and I thank you.
Yeah, and so, some of it is philosophy and culture. I mean, you mentioned the volunteers. Every volunteer, land use volunteers that we've had so far, I interview. We don't appoint anybody that I won't vote for anybody to appoint that I don't speak with directly. And I ask them, are you respectful of the time and money that the applicant is bringing? Do you understand that their time and property is at stake here? It's not just a matter. It's not just a theoretical question. And will you move to get an answer to them in a timely fashion? In other words, I don't know how many. I heard that sometimes people go back 30 times. Did I hear that? How many times?
I'm sorry?
How many times have you been before land use boards?
We're on 38, I think.
Yeah.
So, or 39, 5 years.
So I think you should have gotten an answer by now. I mean, and what can't happen is, oh, I've thought of another thing that you should go get. And because the clock's ticking on a lot of expensive talent and lawyers and all that, and it's simply not fair. So
It's well over $1 million.
Yeah. So
not that it means anything.
I impress that to every volunteer appointee.
I got to wrap it up. I got the hook. So we're going to thank you all for coming. I really appreciate it. The IABC appreciates. We know that this is only one of many things you have to deal with as elected officials, and we are grateful for the work you do for the village, because we know it's not easy. So we thank you for that, and I guess we have to conclude this portion of the meeting.
If anybody has any questions,
Oh, well, so briefly, we'll take a few questions. Okay.
If anybody has any more questions, yeah.
Suzanne McCrory.
Do we have a floodplain administrator?
Do we have a floodplain administrator? I think the engineer was training for that, wasn't he?
He is, and our building inspector is, but currently, right now, our floodplain administrator is Joe Tremelli, who is the consulting engineer for us for 3 or 4 years now.
Is he with Kellard Sessions?
Yeah,
or?
Kellard
Okay.
Sessions, yeah.
Kellard Sessions.
Okay.
Okay. All right, any other, Andrew? Briefly?
I'm holding here almost over $100,000, hundreds of hours of hours work. And women, I'm sorry, men and women, everything, everyone included, that was going towards 72 acres that makes up the industrial area. I'm pleading with you to resurrect us in conjunction with IBC and whoever else in the industrial area. Liaison, let's get back on track. I made a promise to our community in 2014, almost 10 years ago, that this, which includes an overlay, a draft overlay for the industrial area, that when it sits on someone's desk, we have to wipe off the dust. We have to, it's imperative. Our future depends on this. So I'm pleading with you here, and we appreciate you being here. Bring us back. Let us get back to work. We have talent, we have drive, and our future depends on it. So it's all right here.
The committee's still on our website, so let's discuss it, Dan. at our
Okay,
meeting.
any other questions?
Next work
So
session.
we can let these people get back to work?
I don't
Yeah,
have a
Trillian,
question,
sure.
but I would like to comment on what Nora and Leilani, they mentioned. And that was part of our question number 5, item D, about the building department, how to make it more friendly. Sometimes it looks like the building department is being a pest, and we're not giving the answer or the path that everybody would like to follow. But the truth is, we're just a messenger of the code, so we're pretty much enforcing the code. So when you need to open a new business, as you said, Paul, a new tea shop, it's a definition in the code that calls a tea shop as a food establishment. You're serving beverage, you're serving drinks, you're serving, etc. There is a specific article, which is Article 10, that sends this specific applicant to different boards for land use approval. So there's only so much authority we have when we review an application that is only allowed for us to review once it has one of those land use approvals. That's what happens. So maybe a way to make it more friendly, the answer is not set in stone, but it would be a revision of the code or some sort of how you can relax one of those.
Yeah, I think that question was more for the land use boards than it was for you.
So, but
because
sometimes it's hard to make the applicants understand that we're just a messenger of the code, and relaxing the code is not under our jurisdiction. We don't have their authority. So that's the answer, and thank you for noting that.
Okay, so we're good? Mikey? Okay. Thank you again. You guys were terrific, really grateful. You came.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Thank you.